You were taught to save money. They were taught to deploy it. That is not a small difference in strategy. It is a completely different relationship with what money is and what it is supposed to do. You were taught that money sitting in an account is money being responsible. They were taught that money sitting in an account is money being wasted. The same pile of cash looks like security to one person and like a problem to another. That gap in perception is where most of the distance between the two groups lives. You were taught to earn money. They were taught to own things that earn money. This sounds like a variation of the same idea. It is not. Earning money means trading time for it. You show up, you produce, you get paid. Stop showing up, and the money stops. Owning things that earn money means building or acquiring something that produces income independent of your presence. The goal was never the salary. The salary was the tool used to acquire the thing that would eventually make the salary irrelevant. Most people optimize for the salary their entire working lives and never build the thing. Not because they lacked ambition, because nobody told them that the salary was supposed to be a means and not the end. You were taught that a good job is the goal. They were taught that a good job is the starting point. The job provides capital. The capital gets deployed. The deployment generates returns. The returns eventually exceed the job. At that point, the job becomes optional. This sequence is so basic inside certain families that it is never explicitly stated. It is simply assumed the way you assume you will learn to drive when you turn 16. Outside those families, the sequence is invisible. People spend 40 years optimizing for step 1 without knowing steps 2 through 4 exist. You were taught to avoid debt. They were taught to use it. This is the one that creates the most confusion because the surface level advice sounds identical. Don't carry credit card debt. Don't borrow for things that depreciate. Those rules apply at every level. But underneath them is a completely different architecture. Debt to acquire an appreciating asset or a cash-flowing business is not the same category of thing as debt to buy a television. One is a liability. One is a lever. The wealthy use leverage the way a contractor uses scaffolding to build something they could not reach without it, and then they remove it once the structure stands on its own. The instruction most people received was simply, debt is bad. The complete instruction was, consumer debt is bad, strategic debt is a tool, and the difference between them is the entire game. You were taught to think about money monthly. They were taught to think about it in decades. Your budget is monthly. Your rent is monthly. Your paycheck is monthly. The entire financial infrastructure of ordinary life runs on a 30-day cycle, which means the natural unit of financial thinking for most people is 30 days. A purchase that costs $200 a month feels manageable even if it costs $72,000 over 30 years. A 30-year mortgage feels enormous even though the monthly payment is less than rent. The wealthy think in decades not because they are more patient by temperament, but because they were taught to evaluate money across the time horizon where it actually compounds. Compound interest is not interesting over 30 days. It is transformative over 30 years. The people who understand this at 22 are playing a different game than the people who figure it out at 45. The game is the same. The starting position is not. You were taught to protect your income. They were taught to protect their assets. Income protection means keeping your job, staying employed, not doing anything that might disrupt the paycheck. It is a defensive posture oriented around the thing that can be taken away. Because for most people, income is the only financial asset they have. Asset protection means structuring ownership so that what you have built cannot be easily reached by lawsuits, market volatility, or single points of failure. These are not the same concern. One is about not losing the source. The other is about protecting the destination. When you have no assets, income protection is the only game available. But the habits it builds, risk aversion, employment dependence, salary maximization, can persist long after the circumstances that created them have changed. You were taught that investing is risky. They were taught that not investing is riskier. Risk tolerance is not a personality trait. It is a function of information and exposure. If your only experience with markets is watching your parents lose money in 2008 and never recover, risk feels like the story of people who reached too far and paid for it. If your experience is watching a portfolio recover and grow over 20 years, risk feels like short-term noise inside a long-term pattern. The wealthy are not less afraid of losing money. They have simply been exposed to enough cycles to understand that the risk of being in the market is lower than the risk of staying out of it across a long enough time horizon. That understanding is not innate. It is taught or it is earned through experience. And earning it through experience takes time that most people don't have at the beginning, when the decisions that compound most powerfully need to be made. You were taught to spend less. They were taught to earn more. Frugality is not wrong. Frugality applied to a small income produces a slightly smaller small income. There is a mathematical ceiling on what spending less can accomplish. If you earn $35,000 a year and save 15% of it, you are saving $5,250 a year. That number does not compound into financial independence in any realistic time frame at any market return rate. The wealthy do not ignore expenses. They understand that the variable with the largest impact is not the cost side of the equation, but the revenue side. Increase the revenue enough, and the cost side becomes less critical. Most financial advice given to people with low incomes focuses almost entirely on cost reduction because it feels actionable. It is actionable. It is also addressing the less powerful variable. You were taught that wealth is a destination. They were taught that wealth is a system. A destination is somewhere you arrive. You work, you save, you reach the number, and then you have made it. A system is something that runs and produces output continuously. The wealthy do not think of themselves as having arrived at wealth. They think of themselves as operating a system that generates it. The distinction matters because destinations require effort to reach and then stop requiring effort. Systems require effort to build and then require maintenance. The maintenance of a wealth-generating system, managing investments, protecting assets, making allocation decisions, identifying opportunities, is a different kind of work than the work of getting there. People who think of wealth as a destination often reach a number and stop doing the things that produced it. People who think of it as a system keep running it, because stopping the system is the risk, not reaching the number. You were taught to be careful with money. They were taught to be intentional with it. Careful means protecting what you have, checking the account, avoiding the unnecessary purchase, not taking risks you don't understand. It is a posture of defense. Intentional means every dollar has a direction before it arrives. Not a budget in the sense of limits, but an allocation in the sense of deployment. This dollar goes to the index fund. This dollar goes to the emergency account. This dollar goes to the investment opportunity. This dollar gets spent because spending is part of a life, and a life is the point. The wealthy are not more careful with money. They are more deliberate with it. Careful and deliberate look the same from the outside when times are good. When times are bad, the difference becomes clear. Careful people react to what happens. Deliberate people have already decided what to do when it does. You were taught that money changes people. They were taught that money reveals them. This is not a financial concept. It is the frame inside which all the financial concepts live. If you believe money changes people, then accumulating it carries a moral risk. The more you have, the more you might become someone you don't want to be. That belief, often inherited, often unexamined, creates a subtle resistance to the accumulation itself. If you believe money reveals people, then it is a neutral amplifier. It makes generosity more generous, and carelessness more careless, and smallness smaller. The wealthy, broadly, do not believe money is dangerous. They believe it is a resource, like time or energy, and that the character of the person deploying it determines what it produces. This is not a more enlightened view, it is a more useful one, and the difference between a useful frame and a limiting one, held over a lifetime of financial decisions, is compounded in the same way that money is. You were taught to talk about money quietly. They were taught to talk about it precisely. Money is considered impolite in most social contexts. You don't ask what someone earns. You don't discuss what things cost. You don't talk about what you have or what you owe. This social norm is distributed roughly evenly across income levels, but its consequences are not. Wealthy families discuss money with specificity. They discuss salary negotiation as a skill. They discuss investment returns as a topic. They discuss the structure of deals and the mechanics of ownership with the same casualness that other families discuss weekend plans. The information that circulates in those conversations, how to value an equity stake, how to read a term sheet, how to negotiate a compensation package, how to structure an asset purchase, does not circulate in silence. Silence about money is not neutral. It is a mechanism that ensures the information stays inside the rooms where it is already being discussed. You were taught that financial success requires luck. They were taught that it requires systems, and that good systems make luck more likely. This is not a dismissal of luck. Luck is real. Being born in the right country, in the right decade, to the right family, these are not earned. But the wealthy do not organize their financial lives around luck. They build systems, investment structures, risk management frameworks, allocation strategies, professional networks that increase the surface area available for good outcomes to land on. More opportunities reviewed means more good opportunities found. More capital deployed means more positions that can benefit from favorable conditions. More relationships built means more information arriving before it becomes public. Luck lands somewhere. The wealthy build larger targets. You were taught that money is the goal. They were taught that freedom is the goal and money is the tool that buys it. This sounds like the kind of thing that gets printed on motivational content. It is not motivational content. It is a practical distinction with practical consequences. If money is the goal, the metric is the number. More is better. The accumulation is the point. If freedom is the goal, the metric is options. Can you leave the job that is making you miserable? Can you take 6 months to build the thing you believe in? Can you absorb a financial shock without it destroying the life you built? Can you say no to the opportunity that pays well but costs something you don't want to pay? The wealthy are not chasing a number. They are buying options. The number matters only insofar as it expands what is possible. When you understand money as a tool for purchasing freedom rather than as an end in itself, the decisions change. What you optimize changes, what you tolerate changes, and what you are willing to build. Slowly, patiently, without asking for external validation, changes completely. The information was never secret. It was just unevenly distributed, and now you have it.